morning, everybody, and welcome to the Municipalities of Saskatchewan webinar, Building Inclusive Communities. I want to thank you all for attending today, and it's great to have you here. My name is Sean Wiscar. I'm one of the Municipalities of Saskatchewan's Advocacy Advisors, and I would like to thank our webinar sponsor, SummaSure. Thanks to SummaSure's sponsorship, all of Municipalities of Saskatchewan's webinars are now free to all of our members. So be sure to keep an eye out on Municipal Update and our member emails for future webinar opportunities. You can also help shape these webinar opportunities by staying to the end of today's presentation and filling out a survey. Your feedback is going to help make our future webinars even better. A link to today's presentation will be sent out to all registrants in the next few days, as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint. And if other people in your network are looking for it, they can find it live on our Facebook right now, or they can go to our YouTube page in the next coming days to find the recording of today's presentation. As you know, Municipalities of Saskatchewan uses Zoom. You can see all the icons at the bottom of your screen. You have your audio settings at the bottom left of your screen if you're having problems. You have your Q&A for questions. Please note that you have the choice to send your questions anonymously, and we'll be taking all of those at the end of today's presentation. We also have the chat function for comments and conversation. You can send your comments at any time to the panelists or to all panelists and all attendees. We also have the raise hand function, which is going to be used by us if we're having any technical difficulties or want any last minute feedback. It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We have Rhonda Rosenberg, Rebecca Otitoju, and Augustina sorry, Augustina, I have gotten that one wrong, but you can correct me. Rhonda is the Executive Director of the Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan. She's been working with the multicultural community in Saskatchewan since 1995 in a variety of roles. She's experienced in anti-racism education, youth leadership, experiential education, cross-cultural education, nonprofit management, and policy governance. Rhonda has also worked intensely using transformative drama with youth and adults to explore racism and discrimination and find opportunities for positive change. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Rhonda to begin our presentation, and then we will continue on.
Thanks so much, Sean. So I am pleased to be joining you from the Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan today from my home in Regina on Treaty 4 territory and the motherland of the Métis. And I recognize that wherever we are in Saskatchewan, we are on treaty land, on lands that have been lived on by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial, and that in the process of colonization, that there have been many injustices created that go on today, and we all carry responsibility for creating better relationships. So thank you very much to the Municipalities of Saskatchewan for inviting me to take part in this webinar. I'm really looking forward to listening to Rebecca and Augustina as well as questions from you and continuing to build relationships. I'm going to start with why do we want to do this at all? Why do we think that we should have more diverse councils? Why do we think that we need to engage communities? And the answer is that our communities are diverse. They're diverse in lots of ways. So that's just part of the reality of life in terms of human diversity. And that we really want our decision-making bodies to be making the best decisions for all members of the community. And I think that most of us would certainly agree with that. And part of the way that we do that is that we need to have many different perspectives and voices sitting around decision-making tables. So when we are seeking new leaders and nurturing leadership, that's a big part of what we need to do. When we do have voices from communities that we have not, some have been underrepresented in the past, we look at those individuals not as representatives of their community, but as part of our reflection of our whole community. When we have more different kinds of voices around the table, that we have more creativity, better innovation, and better decisions to serve all members of our communities. What it doesn't mean is that we have easier or faster decisions. Sometimes it really does take more conversation, more relationship building, more deeper understanding about why somebody doesn't think something's a good idea or why they do think something's a good idea. So when there is greater diversity, it often does take more time. The other thing that it requires is that we do look at issues like racism and other oppressions that are embedded in our societies and in our communities, in our systems, in our policies, in the ways that we offer our programs, in the processes that we accept as normal. And so doing the anti-racism work that we're hearing more and more about in the last few months is really key to actually engaging diversity in an equitable way and an effective way. So that at a very high level, that's why we want to do this work and be more inclusive. I briefly wanted to touch on three different types of inclusion and one not. So there are different ways of looking to include. And the first that's really not inclusion is disengagement, where we're not looking to include people in functional ways, nor are we looking to include people in social relational ways. Then we also have instrumental inclusion, which is, it's very functional, it's purposeful, it's intentional, and it's goal focused. So there's instrumental inclusion. Then there's relational inclusion, which is much more based on our social relationships and finding equality and social standing in those relationships, trying to build that. When we build both that intentional instrumental inclusion along with the relational inclusion, when we're working in both of those ways, we can actually create transformational inclusion. And I think that that's really where all of us want to be heading. And that's really where we start to both build the relationships and have goals that we're working towards. And it starts to become more organic when we really are engaging in transformational inclusion. It becomes less tokenistic, because instrumental inclusion can be tokenistic. So I wanted to refer to those types, and if you want to look for more of that, either contact me or you can look up Patricia Bradshaw, and because those types of inclusion are based in her work. I also wanted to mention the Welcome and Inclusive Communities Toolkit that MCoS created in partnership really with what was SUMA, now is Municipalities of Saskatchewan. And the toolkit is available on our website for free download, so it's superly easily accessible, and it's actually more useful to download it from our website and have the electronic documents that you can use than it is to get a hard copy from us. And today I wanted to just highlight the diversity lens of super high level overview of the diversity lens that the toolkit in many ways is based around, and some of the steps that we need to ask ourselves questions around when we are beginning to say, you know, I think that we have a little bit too similar thinking or similar backgrounds on our council or on a committee, in our leadership in general in our community. And the first step is an awareness of that. Then we need to think about perceptions. And that's both our perceptions of various facets of our community, but also community members' perceptions of us as well, whatever kind of organization we might be in. So perceptions need to go both ways. And that's a beginning of being able to look at where there may be racism embedded into some of our perceptions. Access is the next step in looking at the diversity lens. How accessible are our programs, right? Accessible in terms of time, money, location, what they are, and then kind of building from that access is about relevancy. Do I see this as something being for me, right? Do I see this as like, when I was a kid, I didn't see brownies as being something that was for me. That was what some of the other kids did, but I didn't see that for the people who were of my ethnic group, did not participate in that. So that idea of relevancy, is this something relevant in my life that's important? And do I see it being for me? Then there's engagement. What are we doing to get out of our own spaces and go to where other folks are gathering? And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But how are we developing relationships? What are we doing to find out, okay, so maybe if I think what we're offering might not be the most relevant, how do I know what would be? And I need to engage with people and then move to the next step, which is relationships and reciprocity, and really build those relationships, understand that there's some give and take, and that we need to all be benefiting from the relationship. That it's not just I'm seeking out a relationship to milk you for information, but that the you in that relationship is also seeing themselves as benefiting. And finally, in the steps in the diversity lens, it's a planning step. And in municipalities, we're certainly familiar with that. And so it's about, how do we engage with people, build those relationships, and then engage with them so that there are really opportunities to plan for evolution, to plan for the future. And so those are what the lens gives us, is some steps and questions to take in order to really think through how we do all of that, and how we're doing on it right now, and what we could be doing better. So that's kind of the diversity lens is the heart of the Welcoming Inclusive Communities Toolkit. There are other aspects as well. And there's stories from municipalities and organizations. There are different some additional steps in there. One of the things that I wanted to touch on this morning is on where to reach out to. And in the toolkit, there is an infographic that's a map of Saskatchewan, and it's got on it all of the friendship centers, all of the newcomer welcome centers, as well as some other settlement agencies, all of the regional multicultural councils, sometimes which are also settlement agencies, sometimes they have dual roles. I think that's and the sport, culture, and recreation districts as well. So those are all organizations that are good places to reach out when you're wanting to develop those relationships, connect with some new people, perhaps nurture some leadership, find people for committees that may not be the typical people that you've had on committees before. Another place would be ethnocultural organizations. Depending on the size of your community, there may or may not be very formalized ethnocultural communities. But it's also possible to reach out to the provincial bodies. Some of the ethnocultural community organizations have provincial bodies. For example, like I know today's focus has come a little bit from the really important attention on Black Lives Matter. And so in terms of African communities, there is the African Canadian Resource Network, which is an excellent resource. There's Saskatchewan African Canadian Heritage Museum, which is a virtual museum. It's all online, but also has volunteers that are happy to help connect. And then there are specific ethnocultural organizations, sometimes organized by smaller ethnic groups, sometimes by nationality. And if you're having trouble finding them, please do contact MCoS. We can often help you connect with usually provincial bodies, sometimes more localized bodies as well. And I think that is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to bring as an overview, that this is really important work to serve our communities well. And I realize that with the municipalities, obviously, that to be on council, to be mayor, you need to be elected. But this is really about thinking about how we reach out, how we nurture that leadership really broadly. So thank you so much for this invitation, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Rebecca and Augustina. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rhonda. Next, we'll go over to Rebecca. Rebecca is originally from Nigeria. She is now a counselor and has a husband of 41 years. And they've been hands-on members of the White City community for the last 15 years. A mother of 4 and a grandmother of 9, as well as a volunteer coordinator and co-founder / senior pastor of the White City Ambassadors for Christ Church. Rebecca is an expert at striking the right balance between work and life and family and community. No matter where in the world life has taken her, Rebecca has made it a priority to participate in the community that she calls home. Never one to sit on the sidelines, she decided to run for council in 2012 as a way of giving her passion and dedication to the town of White City. Rebecca has been involved with the museum, the Eco Museum project from the very beginning, and she is proud of her relationships that have grown between the town and the Royal Saskatchewan Museum and the University of Regina in the name of the White Butte Museum. Part of the lure of White City is the sense of home it provides. Even though it's a small town concept, it has a spirit of camaraderie between neighbors. So while Rebecca hopes the community continues to grow into a city, she knows her council has a responsibility to maintain White City's security, low-cost living, high-quality services into the future. She's hopeful that the Town Center project will become a reality that successfully blends the urban ideas of a downtown into the small town serenity of our village square. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca, and I'm just going to pull up the slides. Perfect. And then Rebecca, if you want to turn your camera on, and Rhonda, your camera's still on, so you don't have to leave it on if you don't want.
Thank you so much, Sean, and I hope that everyone can see me. I've been trying to adjust my light. Yeah, I'm going to speak to some specifics from what Rhonda has presented. I'm so thankful to be part of this webinar. I see it as a way of the municipalities of Saskatchewan actually taking up leadership and being leaders in this, and recognizing that in our communities, we do have diversity. So please, could you go to my second slide, move to the next one. When Sean was talking to me, he wanted me to talk a little bit about my experience on council, or even what elected officials should be. As read from my bio, one of my principle, maybe as a family, is that wherever we are, we believe we are part of that community. We believe that we are not just new people and we are not strangers. And we did the same thing even with White City as well. When we moved in, we find opportunities to be involved, and we got involved. Could you go to the next slide, please? I will move on to the next one just because of time. I want us to deliberate a little bit. So please move to the next slide. You know, talking about council as part of my way of giving back to the community. And I'm very grateful that 2 times that I've tried, now I have been elected. But one thing that I will take away and forever be grateful is the work that goes into being a councillor and the decisions that you have to make, which I think as a member of any community, we should all participate. And so on council, I do believe that my running for council, because that was one of the things as well, I didn't see it as anything as an advantage or disadvantage because of my African Canadian background. I see it as an opportunity to run as other members of the council as well would do. Please, could you go to the next slide? Sorry about that. That's one of the disadvantages of having a slide, because you have to catch up with me. So I see it as, okay, I just need to do the work. I need to let people know my reason for running and let them decide, which they did. And I'm very thankful about that. And then, you know, being on council, Sean mentioned museum, which was actually the first question I asked on council. Why don't we have a museum? Please go ahead to the next slide. Why don't we have a museum in White City? And why do we need to search for the history? So after a while, I was able to put together a committee, but I'll go back to the myth about White City, even as I talk about being on council. You know, many times the myth, which many people maybe might not realize, is the fact that most people in my community believe that White City was built for white people. This wasn't something I thought about. I was confronted with this statement as, oh, you live in White City, how did you get there? I said, what do you mean? Oh, I thought it was for white people. So it became a situation of education for me as well, even within my own community. And my joke was, I went to the bank, I applied for mortgage, I got approved, and I moved into the city. So I see my being on council also as an opportunity for education and also to break that myth about White City, even as I have on the slide. Please, let's go to the next slide. So the issue of museum, we started, and I hope that even as we advance, even in this project, more about the history would come out. It has been an award-winning project, many award-winning projects that we have embarked on, from even capturing the history of the town, of residents around the town and around White Butte, to the school projects that we embarked on and all the relationships that we have built. So I'm sure the museum will continue, and even including the library, to bring education even on this side. Let's move on. You know, responding to events in the community. For me as an African person, it was important for council to respond to certain issues, which probably they might not see, and that doesn't mean that it wasn't because they were not paying attention. So just to buttress that diversity that Rhonda mentioned, I'm sure they might be surprised at why was I so concerned about the council of White City making a statement when that plane crashed in Iran. My comment was, you know, there could be people who were indirectly or directly affected in our community. And because the percentage of immigrants in the community is so small, it's so easy to just think, oh, we are not affected. So making that statement, if I'm from that country originally and the government of my town is now making a statement of condolence, realizing that what happened could have affected me, I feel so much part of that community that, oh, so somebody noticed this. And the same thing too, when Black Lives Matters rally started, that also was brought to council. I highlighted this too, just for you to see how we think about the diversity. Even though as council members, our sewer system, our water, and everything that we do, they are very, very, very much important. But also there are little things that we might overlook, all because we just didn't know. And I know that making the statement that, you know, Black Lives Matters, every life matters, because when we treat ourselves with dignity, probably we will not have all the rallies that we are having right now. So I'm going to move straight into what we can do as a community to actually reach out to members of our community that might feel that they are underrepresented. Talk to them. For example, there's an older lady in White City, and I will actually mention her name, Fran. One of the things she does is to stop and talk to new people. She had always said it, but one day I was in town. I went for a program that she was in as well, and I went with one of my relations. So I stepped away, and before I came back, Fran was talking to her, asking when she came to Canada, how is she doing, how is she coping with the weather. It was winter time. And after she left, she asked me, do you know that lady? I said, yeah, I know her very well. Oh, she's very, very nice. She's the first one that will stop to even care to talk to me. So these are little things, but they are also very, very, very important. So let's take time to talk to people that are different from us. So I wasn't surprised because it became a way of life for her as well. And many people have a welcome package, even as we have heard, include maybe things to bring the newcomers, not only immigrants, the newcomers to the community, bring them out, acknowledge their presence in the community, and take time to welcome them. The next slide. Make effort to get to know them. Get to know them. The quote beneath my presentation says, until you make an effort to get to know something, you don't know anything. Many times, immigrants are misjudged. For example, in my culture, it is very disrespectful for me to sit before you as an elder or my supervisor to have eye contact with you. That was my first lesson when I came to Canada. But if you don't know that, you will judge me to be not honest, not confident, hiding something. So getting to know people and getting to know their culture is very, very, very important as we encourage immigrants to know the culture of the new environment. My challenge to leaders will also be to take time to know the new people in your community, the immigrants in your community, other than their food and the way they dress, because there are many things that are different. The next slide. Listen to them when they speak to you about their experiences. You know, one of the reasons why at times we don't want to talk is because people become very, very defensive when it comes to issue of racism. And the time that people are talking to you, they are not actually referring to you as a racist. They are not pointing to you as the one that did this to them. They are pointing to the situation that they have experienced, pointing to the things that they have gone through, either as individuals or as a family. So yours is to listen. And if you have the power to do something about it, to do. But many times we become a little bit uncomfortable with that statement, because then, oh, she would think I'm racist. No, that's not the reason. The reason is to be able to understand what they are going through. And just with any relationship, when I start making excuses for my behavior, definitely that person will also feel uncomfortable talking to me. Can we go to the next slide, please? I've mentioned this briefly now, so I'm just echoing the same thing, that probably even when the issue of racism comes up, don't defend it. Instead, be comfortable to talk about it. I've heard things like, oh, you know, we're not racist. Everybody, including myself, every human being is racist to some extent. We just need to challenge that mindset. We need to challenge that mindset. So, and that's the reason why we need things like this. So when we are talking about racism, it would be wrong to think that, oh, it's the white people that are racist against Black people. No. Every human being, we have that atom of racism, but challenging it, talking about it is what we need to do, and which I'm really grateful that the Municipalities of Saskatchewan is doing right now. Let's go to the next. Thank you. Treat everybody equitably. Rhonda also mentioned this. You know, we have something called the employment equity. Do you know that many of the youth in our community will not self-declare? When I talk to many of them, why are you not self-declaring? Because people think I'm Black. That was why I got that job. They will not see that it was because I qualify. And if we treat ourselves fairly, if we are equitable towards each other, I'm sure we might not even need employment equity. But at times people think you got the job. And I hope I'm not being elected because I'm Black. I'm being elected because I'm a member of this community and I believe I have something to offer. I will be rounding up very soon. Please, let's go to the next slide. Make them feel part of the community, because we could be 0.05% of the community, but their little or diverse contribution could be a key success even to the community. The next slide, please, which is, I think, my last slide. You know, systemic racism is something that we all find very difficult to define. One of the ones that is very, very common among us is when you apply for a job and you get this, we are really sorry to inform you that you didn't get the job. And the reason was because you are overqualified. Many people feel that is a very polite way to tell me that I'm not getting that job because of my color, even though that might not be the reason. Because before I applied for that job, I actually knew I was overqualified. What I was looking for was Canadian experience that is required with every job that I'm applying for. And I wanted that Canadian experience. So I want to finish by challenging us that to say nothing, by this quote, to say nothing is saying something. You must denounce what you are against, or might believe that you support things you really do not. And I changed it a little bit. The red section said you must denounce those things that are not right, because racism is not right. If we start treating ourselves with respect, knowing that every life matters, regardless of the color of your skin, I'm very sure we will not have the rallies going on. And our children are making that statement right now that all they need is to be able to apply for jobs so that what their parents experience, they will not experience. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this webinar.
Thank you very much. That was a really great presentation, Rebecca, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with everyone on the webinar today. Next up, we have Augustina. Augustina is the Advocacy Advisor with Municipalities of Saskatchewan, and her portfolio includes community and economic development, the environmental files. Prior to coming to Canada, she worked with the government, private and not-for-profit organizations, and was also an entrepreneur in her home country. Augustina holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Master's degree in Public Administration from the University of Regina, and she also has an Immigration Consultant Diploma. When she's not at work, she likes to spend her time with her family and provide financial education to families as a licensed financial advisor. So without further ado, go ahead and kick it off, Augustina.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thanks everyone for being on this call today. Today, I'll be discussing why and how municipalities can attract, welcome, and integrate immigrants. When I mean immigrants, I'm talking about the visible minority groups in their hometowns. Also, I'll be talking about the challenges that these immigrants face in Canada. Let me share a story with you today. In 2015, a few months after I arrived in Canada for my master's program, I had my first experience as a Black immigrant to Canada. I entered a commercial bus. A white lady was sitting on one of the two-seater chairs. I moved to sit on the empty chair beside her. She screamed angrily at me and said, "You can't sit here." I was shocked and flabbergasted because I have never seen or met her in my life. I was still trying to internalize and process what just happened. Another white lady came and sat on the same empty space, and my angry lady said nothing to her. Next slide, please, Sean. The Employment Equity Act defines the visible minority persons as persons who are not Aboriginal people, who are not Caucasians in race, and who are not white in color. This is a group of immigrants I am referring to today. They include the Blacks, the Filipinos, the Latinos, the Japanese, and even the Koreans. The next slide. Now, why do municipalities need to include, to welcome, or to integrate immigrants in their municipalities? There are many reasons why they should occur. The first one is because of increase in population. We all know that there are older ones in our communities who are dying, and even the younger ones are moving to larger cities. We have about 5 million Canadians who will retire by 2035, and there will definitely be need for replacements of these people in the workforce. 25% Canadians will be about 65 years come 2035. Then we have Canadian fertility rates, which is reducing as opposed to the replacement rates. You have the economic sustainability that municipalities will stand to gain when they attract new immigrants. You also have cultural diversity and vibrant community. Next slide. This brings me to one of many success stories of a community that attracted, welcomed, and integrated an immigrant Muslim family. Sean, can you please quickly share the video?
I apologize, wrong screen. Just give me 1 second.
That's okay.
Screen.
Your community can actually be on the international scale, as you will see with this wonderful family.
I want to share with you one story among many, because we need to remember just who we're talking about. Antigonish is a small community in Nova Scotia. It's home to a university that just about doubles the town's population every school year. It's also home to a group of big-hearted Canadians who, like thousands of others across the country, came together to help sponsor a Syrian refugee family. Thanks to their leadership in their community at the beginning of this year, the Haddad family arrived in Antigonish from the refugee camp in Lebanon that had been their home for the past 3 years. Here's where things get interesting. Back home in Damascus, the Haddads had owned a successful business, a chocolate factory that employed 30 people. And when they arrived in Nova Scotia, after getting acclimatized, because Canadian winters are pretty much what you'd expect, they started to look for opportunities to rebuild their business and to rebuild their lives. And step by step, with the support of their community, they did just that. By May, their home-based business was doing so well that they were able to donate their profits to the Canadian Red Cross to help out with relief efforts in Fort McMurray, right on the other side of the country, which had been hit hard by wildfires. The Haddad said that they knew what it felt like to flee their countries and flee their homes and lose everything, and they wanted to help by giving back what they could. Last month, just 8 months after arriving in Canada, the family realized their dream and opened a small chocolate factory in their new hometown. It's called Peace by Chocolate. And you can follow them on Facebook.
Sean, thank you so much. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you, Sean. I would like to say here that your municipality can actually be the next Antigonish. Now, immigrants in Canada face various challenges. As you look at the picture, you will see different obstacles that the lady will have to overcome to get to her goals. It is important to mention at this juncture that these challenges might be different based on individual immigrants as well as the communities.
Saskatchewan may be the only jurisdiction.
However, there are some common challenges that immigrants across Canada face, which some persons do not see, or they see and do not consider, or they just look away, or maybe they do not just care. The first one is employment. Many immigrants do not get jobs in their field of study or where they have specialties. Also, there's always a problem of you do not have any Canadian experience. This most of the time leads me to wonder and ask the question, how can you have a Canadian experience without being given the opportunity to work? Or how can you have, is it possible to have a Canadian experience acquired in your home country before coming to Canada? The next one is language. There's always an issue of you have an accent. Another one is racism and discrimination. Culture shock or crisis is a big one. I remember, just like Rebecca mentioned, the eye contact thing. It was, even till now, I still struggle with that. I never knew until I was in one of my classes, and my professor asked me a question. I couldn't look at him in the face. So after the class, he told me, "Why are you looking away?" I said, "Well, that is how I was brought up." And he said, here in Canada, if you are talking to someone and you don't have that one-on-one eye contact, it means you have something you're hiding. So I told him, do you think I have something I'm hiding? I'm just struggling to kind of transition from my culture to the new culture. The next one is a problem of transitioning into the new environment. And these are just to mention a few. Next slide, please. Now, some of the roles of municipalities are discussed by UNESCO. They include familiarizing immigrants with the culture of the people, collaborating with the law enforcement authorities to ensure their safety and security in their new environment. These suggestions and many more you can find in the article Delis Hector and myself wrote on our website. However, to be able to play your roles properly, I have tried to provide a simplified process which I grouped under motion, action, and results. Next slide, please. Motion is a process that helps you to kickstart an action. It allows you to discuss how you can attract, how you can welcome, and how you can integrate immigrants in your hometown. Now, note that motion can never produce any result by itself without an action. What do I mean by that? For instance, if your council approves a salary raise, that is still motion in place. Until that approval is implemented, until the employees start seeing the difference, the raise in their paycheck, it is not an action. Now, what about action? The action helps you to, one, identify the immigrants in your community. It helps you to build relationship of trust and engage the key players in the community, in your community. It also gives you the opportunity to be considerate of the challenges that these people face. It helps you to invite them to observe your council meetings and to run for elections and also any other events that you have. The action will help you to know the centers that support immigrants, develop and implement policies, and provide education for these people. Now, results. By the time you put all these actions into work, you will definitely get some huge results. Some of the results will include the immigrants running for election like you have, Rebecca. It will include you having a multicultural, diverse hometowns. It will include economic growth, and it will also include population increase and many more wonderful impacts, positive impacts, once you are able to identify what your goals are, what your objectives are, put them, have discussions within your council, then roll them out into action. Then the last slide shown. I would love to end my presentation today with the analysis of immigration in Saskatchewan. And this analysis was given by a university professor. Thank you all for joining us and also for your time. Sean, please, you can play the final video.
I think Saskatchewan may be the only jurisdiction in the world that got to the 1930s, hit more or less 1 million people, and then stayed stable through the whole 20th century. And the story behind that is really kind of rural depopulation and the end of small farms. when we surged in population again, starting kind of around 2007 with newcomers. If you spend time in Newfoundland, it's a province expecting its population to decline by perhaps 20%. That's a whole different social and political reality, and it's a sad one. We've avoided that because people have wanted to come here. I think a lot of folks who've moved from abroad to Saskatchewan will be faced with a choice: do I stay here, or, to pick on Brampton in Ontario, do I move to where there's a bigger community for my culture and stuff, and where I probably have family ties? Is Saskatchewan just a way station, or can we be a community where people really want to set down roots and become permanent members of the community here? I think that's a choice that we all have a part in. And do we embrace that our immigration mix is a little bit different? So to my knowledge, we're the only Canadian province where Filipinos are the biggest immigrant community. That's a very different social and political dynamic than you'd see in Vancouver or Toronto, and we don't talk much about it. And if I look at the communities that are really well integrated into political life, I think of the East Indian community here in Regina being deeply connected. You're seeing some of the Sikh folks get involved in politics, but you're not seeing involvement from what's actually our biggest immigrant community. And I don't know the reasons for that, but it's certainly something noteworthy. In Canadian terms, we still actually don't have a lot of newcomers, and a lot of the folks that have come here are professionals, so doctors, nurses, lawyers, accountants. That's the easiest group to integrate. And part of the success story of Canadian integration overall has been that's what immigration means to us, has been highly educated, frankly somewhat westernized immigrants. So insofar as Saskatchewan still has that kind of classic Canadian mix, I think we'll work through it, but there are going to be flashpoints. The federal election will push things a little bit, I think. We've been relatively free of anti-Muslim sentiment in the province, but I'd expect to see some of that as that community gets larger and more visible. I think it's the economic story. Are we in a place where we're giving people the same chances, and that the Canadian dream that we're selling is actually a reality? We're not as sunny there as we were 20 years ago. But if we're not actually delivering on that dream, we really do, I think, need to take a look at how we're admitting people, where we're admitting people, and perhaps how many, right? I don't think it's fair to have doctors driving cabs because we just decided to let more doctors than we can actually employ as doctors in.
Thank you, Augustina, for that great presentation. It was really informative, and I hope that as attendees of today's webinar that you were able to take some action items away from Augustina's presentation and help implement them in your community. So next, we're going to move into the Q&A section. If anyone has questions of any kind, they can certainly submit them in the Q&A pod. That's at the bottom of your screen. I'll get all of the panelists to turn their cameras back on, and then we'll move into our sets of questions. And while we wait for some questions to come in, I was writing a couple down during the presentations, and I thought they were really good. The first one I have is for Rhonda. Rhonda, do you have any examples of best practices in the province or really great initiatives that you've seen municipalities do, maybe in partnership with a new coming center or even your organization that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to highlight. I know in the city of Yorkton has really owned that this is really important in the work that they do. And one of the things that they have done is really reached out to a variety of newcomer and Indigenous people, younger people, to train them as lifeguards and then employ them through the city. And so that would be one example of where it really takes some outreach to cultivate a relationship and instigate a new avenue to employment. And then once, as we often know, once you get young people engaged as lifeguards, that they often find new ways of engaging in the community as well. So that would be one example. I'm trying to think on a different leadership level about another example that I know of. I think I'll maybe highlight the city of Saskatoon has really, for many years, taken the importance of this work. And so they've created very clear staff positions, one around anti-racism work, one around newcomers, immigrants, and refugees, and one around Indigenous peoples. Actually, I think there are more than one for Indigenous peoples now. As well, they operate the local immigration partnership through the city. So that would be another example of really creating staff positions that that are able to help engage in the work. I realize that Saskatoon and Regina are not in the same category as most municipalities are, but I think that a focus and dedication of resources is often really important.
And that's really interesting. I think like there's a good point there that, you know, nothing really brings a community better together better than, you know, it's a hot day and everyone wants to go and jump in the swimming pool. So that's a great way and a great starting point for, you know, community outreach and helping build better communities. Next, we'll hop over to Rebecca. Rebecca, you were talking a lot about the myth of White City and how it's only for white people. And I was just wondering if you had any advice for communities on how to make themselves more attractive to newcomers and to encourage that immigration to come in. And what are kind of some things that you can do on the municipal council level that makes your community welcoming and open?
You know, as I mentioned initially, we all need to be comfortable talking about these issues because it's something that is very, very important. For example, when I brought the issue of Black Lives Matters to council, as I said, it wasn't because maybe if I'm not on council, they might not have thought about making the statement, and it wasn't because they want to say, oh, it doesn't matter. But at the same time, when we look at the things we bring to the table as individuals with our diverse experience, I think that makes it very, very important for us to do everything to make sure that we attract people. The danger of the reason why we might not do this is because of the percentage. So for example, even using the census of White City as an example, in 2016, we have 25 people who declared to be Africans. So 25 people doesn't do anything with your vote. You don't need that 25 people. But until council know that we need everyone, because once you come to town, you are an important part of that town. Then that brings that discussion, like what Augustina talked about motion. I can't remember the middle one, and then result. So it's something that you have to start talking about. Have your welcome package. Probably do a barbecue and bring all the newcomers, even not just immigrants this time, but all the newcomers with immigrants included. Adopt that mindset that I shared of an older lady in our community. She used to sit on council. Fran did not know that that person was my relation because she didn't see me with her, but because it's a part of her. So I was not surprised to see her. So we have to be intentional to invite people.
Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. And we actually just had a question come in that's really similar to this. So I'll pose this to you, and then Rhonda and Augustina, if you want to add anything, feel free. Someone said there wasn't a whole lot of mentions of schools to partner up with and build solid relationships, but schools and food are passion areas of everyone, and they can be foundational for us to move forward. Have you had any experiences or challenges and benefits you found trying to partner with schools in your community?
Do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah.
Okay, with the museum, as I mentioned initially, we if not for Eco Museum, we for the COVID-19, not the Eco Museum, COVID-19. In the past 2 years, we've had ecology program for the children, which is different from talking about racism. But I know that one of the reasons behind my own mind of saying we need a museum is a place of history. Library is also a place of history. And racism also happened in our schools. For example, as immigrant parents, I want my child to go to school. And even though being the only Black person in that class, for children not to look down on him or her, or her coming home saying, you know, I was called names today, I was treated this way today. So partnering with the school is very, very, very important. And I hope that in every area, the schools board is doing something about this so that children will not experience this, because these things start from home. And that's the reason why, even as parents, we need to be very careful what comments we make, what we say to our children at home. So it's a great place to partner, and I'm very sure that down the line it will be something that the museum in White City would look at different education, or even partner with library, which I know that library is also very keen in that education.
Sean, can I quickly jump in also? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
To add to what Rebecca just said, yes. If you saw part of the things I talked about under action is learning, having the opportunity to collaborate, to build relationship of trust with the key players in your community. Now, the school is part of the key players in your community. Let me share a small story with you. My daughter is 13 years. When they came to Canada in 2016, the third week when she came home, she told me the teacher called her an N-word, that's nigger. Well, because I came before all of them, all my kids, I already have experienced a lot of what racism is all about. Like I tell people, if you have not experienced racism, you really do not understand the full definition of racism. So I have experienced it, I have internalized it, I have learned to, one, suck it up, and secondly, to also respond positively. So when she came home, she told me that, and all the students were laughing in the class. And I told her, you know what? That is not a problem. And she asked me, what is that? What is nigger? I said, oh, nigger is meant for beautiful people. It's for wonderful people, intelligent. And I used all the wonderful adjective to qualify, positive adjective to qualify that. Why did I do that? I wanted that child to be able to sit in the class, focus on her education, and also be able to not look at the teacher who had called her that name, or even the students, her friends who were laughing. Schools will be one of the greatest areas to actually partner with municipalities, and that is education. Push it there. When you are able to do that, you would have been able to change a lot of lives. There's someone in my country, Wole Soyinka, he says something. He said, if a man dies in him, that keeps quiet in tyranny. So if things are happening around you, you don't talk about it, you don't even put it as an agenda on your council for discussion, then you have not started. You are still in that process of motion until you move from talking about it, until you move from, okay, let's go talk to the school, let's find out what these welcome centers or centers that support immigrants are doing. You will be there. And your communities, your hometowns will keep depleting. If an immigrant is in an area where they are not welcome, bet you they will leave. That is the truth. So school is a good place to start with the children.
Thank you, Augustina. Rhonda, we have a couple minutes left, so do you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I would just say that I agree that it's really important to start with children. That there's young people have a really strong drive towards fairness and justice, and that as they develop, they're not too young to begin with, in age appropriate ways, conversations about difference and fairness, and really building in strong anti-racism work as they get older, because provide some of those resources and programming for schools. I also wanted to say that because obviously children are attached to adults in the community, that they often are a really good place to bring people together. And that working with schools, I know that I once heard a story from an arts council in a small community, and they said, you know, we did a program where we brought a choir in, but we also had our local schools performing at that concert, which meant that all the parents came out, right? So you had all the diversity of the community having the parents there. And so that's a place that does have access when you engage schools, and then it can be an opportunity to, as I said, be where the people are and start to build those relationships. I think it's really important. The racism that Augustina was talking about is very serious. I just want to say, not far from Rebecca's home, we lost the life of Caleb Schmidt a couple of years ago to suicide because of bullying, very clearly racist bullying. Yeah. And that these are serious issues that we all need to take responsibility for improving that sense of belonging and equity in our communities.
Well, another huge thank you to all of our panelists today. Your presentations were, I hope, eye-opening for the attendees today, because I certainly learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did as well. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. I want to thank everyone for submitting their great questions. And as you know, we will be providing the presentation to all registrants in the next few days, as well as a PDF of today's PowerPoint and the contact information for the panelists if you have follow-up questions. Included in the recording is also going to be an invitation to our next webinar, which will be around reopening your recreation sites, hosted by Dr. Shahab, the Chief Medical Health Officer of the province of Saskatchewan. And that's coming up on August 18th. So we hope to see you there. Another huge thank you to our panelists, and